Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your Disrupt MC and Special Projects Editor TechCrunch, Jordan Crook.
Woo! Good morning, brave souls. You're here, you're early, and this place will fill up, but I will remember each and every one of you for being here on time. You're my favorites now, so enjoy that. We don't care about being your favorites. Let's see. TC Disrupt, still the hashtag. We didn't change it for the last 6 years, so just keep on using that one. There have been a couple changes to our schedule, so if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of that, go ahead and check that out on the app, because it obviously will not be reflected in your printed brochures. And we are going to go straight into our first panel. Please welcome to the stage Naren Shaam of GoEuro and our moderator, Ingrid Lunden.
Morning. Hi, Naren.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Cool. So GoEuro. GoEuro.
Yep.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your history? Because I don't know how many people are actually familiar with GoEuro, because you've got a sort of interesting travel history that led to you doing a travel startup.
Yep.
Okay, tell us about it, please.
So very briefly, so I travel a lot. I spend long periods of time traveling. Traveled Southeast Asia, a lot of South America, and then I traveled Europe in 2010. I did 4 months of roughly, I think, 14 countries or something like that. So what was great about Europe for me was ground transportations everywhere. Every country has somewhere between 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 train stations and bus stations reaching every part of every country in Europe. So it was great experiencing the culture, the differences, etc. But the problem for me was most of ground transport infrastructure across Europe was never on a single platform. It was very nationalistic, country by country.
Yeah, super fragmented.
Yes,
yeah.
correct. State rail companies. In the UK, there's 21 of them. So it's
And they all run perfectly.
They're all run perfectly, of course.
They're very efficient.
Especially in Switzerland.
They're not efficient in England, by the way. They're really rubbish.
Yes. So I saw how nationalistic most of ground transportation is, country by country. Crossing the border, it gets even harder, and every country has anywhere between 25 to 60 coach or long distance buses. So what most people do was basically compare, or when they do really long distance, most consumers go to Google and say, what's the closest airport to The Hague? And then you go to an airline website, book the flight, and then you go to Google again, say, how do I get from Rotterdam to The Hague or any location? So what I wanted to do was build a platform that brings all of ground transportation online. When I started it, there was no Amadeus or Sabre of ground transportation. The data itself was not normalized across any technology. So I moved here 4 years ago to Europe to start building it. I moved to Berlin, started the company. I'm a single founder. And it took me roughly a year to get the first contract, because state rail companies have a long process, let's say. And then launched the product 3.5 years ago. Today we are roughly 200 plus people. We operate in 12 countries. We work with about 600 train and buses. We're probably the largest inventory system across all of Europe. And we also go direct to consumers. So most of our tickets are actually sold on GoEuro rather than, we don't build technology to redistribute today.
Right. Why did you decide to do all that out of Berlin versus London or wherever? And why did you decide to move to Europe because we have a more extensive ground transport system already, because there are more trains and buses effectively, or?
Correct.
So why Berlin then?
So if you look at global ground transportation, it's never on a single distribution system like airlines is. Most of airlines, you can book a flight from Sydney to Buenos Aires in any website sitting in Indonesia, and you can get the flight. The prices will change depending on the website, but of course you can buy the ticket. Most of ground transportation is never online, and Europe is kind of the epicenter of ground transportation. There is good ground transportation in a lot of parts of Asia and a lot of parts of South America. Buses are huge, so it's not that Europe is the only market. Europe is, for me, the first market to try out. So that's why I called the company GoEuro and moved here. Why Berlin was fairly straightforward. I used to live in New York, so for me the three hubs that made the most noise, let's say, when I was researching was Stockholm, London, Berlin. Stockholm was for me a little distant from Central Europe.
It's also very expensive there.
It's also very expensive.
Yeah.
I knew from the beginning that it would be a very large engineering company. So we're really largely, more than half of us are engineers. So hiring a lot of engineers in London is expensive. So cost of labor in Berlin is much cheaper. So it was basically a very rational choice to move to Germany and start the company.
And you're happy you did that. Do you think now, you know, as you grow, that you may need to, excuse me, move your center somewhere else?
No,
or
I think we'll stay in Berlin. I like Berlin. We've been there, like I said, 4 years. We are considering opening more locations to tap into talent, because as we scale, talent is, I guess, the key asset we have.
Absolutely.
So this is something we are considering, but HQ will always be Berlin.
Okay, now you guys have raised a ton of money, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the reason I think part of it is you've got a, when you first started, you were kind of breaking new ground. I mean, they call it the multimodal transport market, right?
Yep.
You've got, you know, basically bunch of disparate train services, disparate bus services, all now being woven onto one platform. You guys also do air travel, I believe.
Yep.
It's kind of like the city mapper of
Long distance.
long distances, yeah. City mapper, I believe we'll be hearing from later today. So now, that was when you started. Now, there actually are a ton of companies all trying to, well, not a ton, but you know, a good amount trying to do this, not to mention companies like Amadeus. You know, the Amadeus organization and Sabre, I'm assuming they can't not be looking at this opportunity, right?
Yep.
You've got from A to B, Wanderio, A to B or something like that. No, L to 2, Rome to Rio.
Yep.
Yeah, you've got a bunch. So what is your kind of, you know, unique selling point when you've got a lot of them doing this effectively the same thing? Why are you doing it better? Why would you say yours is a more interesting thing, or is it better to have all of them doing it at the same time?
Yeah. So to come back to your first point, this space which we are in is called multimodal transport, more a trade term, multimodal transport. But if you actually think about it, multimodal transport is what most people do every day anyway. So you are taking a train from London to Gatwick to take the flight to Paris, and then you are going to take a train back. So you are changing more than one mode of travel on majority of journeys. Most of Europe has more trains. So the ratio of train stations to airports in every country is roughly 1:200 to 1:400. So every country has something between 2,000, 10,000 train stations and maybe 25 to 50 airports. So majority of consumers are getting off a flight and traveling.
Right.
So this is one way of multimodality. The second way to measure multimodality is when you simply compare. So I'm going Paris, Amsterdam. Is Thales cheaper than a bus? How much longer? And a flight, including the train to the airports on both sides, is still 4 hours. And the train is city center to city center, and you compare what's best for me at the specific day. There's also multimodality. You still stick to one mode, but you just compare two different modes of travel. So the whole industry of multimodality is fairly new in that it more focuses on the consumer, in that the consumer has to go from location A to location B, Berlin, Hamburg, Berlin, Prague, Madrid, Barcelona, and so let technology or platforms like us figure out what's the best way to travel and give you the options, and you just click 2 buttons and buy. Instead of, oh, this is a journey that's 900 kilometers, I'm going to go to a flight website. This is a journey that's 300 kilometers, so I'm going to go to a train website, and this is 600, so I'm going to compare what's the best way. So this is how consumers are trained, because the underlying data is not all on the same platform.
Right.
So this whole industry is large. Like train and buses, last I read, was roughly 2 times that of domestic air, like inter-European air market. So the rail and bus market is large. The industry itself, where all of data, all of Europe comes together in a single platform or a single product, is new. So naturally, it does attract more than one company, because the market is large. When large players like Amadeus or Sabre want to come in, that already tells you that the industry is large and it hasn't been normalized. So it's an opportunity. For us, what we do is we focus on 3 things. as a core, and we deliver that promise. One is we spend a lot of time with our partnerships. So we have 600 plus rail and bus companies. We build extensive relationships to have a direct connection to all the inventory, so we can truly understand the underlying network. So how transport happens, how seats change, and we have deep understanding because we plug in directly to the inventory systems. The second is our technology. So like I said, we build basically a distribution system across all of these rail, bus, and air, and all the data is on the same format. So, 40 different rail companies talking to each other in terms of data in the same format with the buses and with the flights. The second, and the third is we also market to consumers directly. So these are the three things we focus on. It does take us long because we can only move country by country. So we're in 12 countries in 3 years. It's quite fast in industry standard, but for us, we just have to go country by country, so we can't be global very quickly. But when we enter a country, we have a lot of coverage, and we scale up very, very fast.
Why is it taking so long? Because, I mean, Google Maps already offers quite a lot of that, across a number of countries. So, you can't purchase on Google Maps.
Correct.
But is that why it takes so long? Because you're trying to integrate more than just basic data, basic schedules. You're trying to actually be able to let people book and order things. Is that why it's okay?
Yeah. So there's three things that makes it complicated. One is schedules.
Yeah.
Schedules is the most basic of data form. It's mostly static. You don't have real-time queries. It's really fast because it's static. It's on your servers. The second is pricing, which is real-time, because prices change and they yield manage. So this takes time. And the third is inventory management system, which is reservation. Not every seat is available. It gets sold out. So it's 3 degrees of complication rather than just schedules.
Got it. Okay, you mentioned pricing and purchasing.
Oh.
So maybe it's a good time to ask you, how do you guys actually make money?
It's very straightforward. For a consumer, it's the same cost as what you would buy at any other website, any other train or bus website. But we charge a commission to the suppliers.
What's your commission?
It's confidential.
You can tell me. You can tell us, right? He can tell us?
It's okay.
Does it vary, or is
varies,
it a fixed commission?
No, it's
so like if I
variable.
found out from one person, if I tap one of your suppliers and get a number, it wouldn't necessarily be the same
and
number.
it also varies heavily by volumes.
Got it.
And some countries we are very large in volume, some we're just getting started. So
Would you say it's like standard to what the other aggregators in plane services get, or how have you had to figure out what the right price is for that?
So we actually didn't look at the airline industry to look at how to price the commission. We more started off as what does it take in terms of acquisition cost in our industry and how to price it. And we just play in a different market than just pure airline market. Yep.
Got it. Okay, and really the main question about how you charge for that is, are you guys like profitable now?
No.
Okay.
So
Is it the kind of thing that you will be, can you project that the model or the commission you guys are taking now, once you have it all up and going and you've scaled out, that it'll be profitable, or how does it work?
Absolutely. So when you look at it, it's basically like building a car factory, right? You build a factory, you got to buy the machinery, you build the cars, and then you have to market it, and at some point it starts to. That's the same thing we see is our early markets where we launch. It takes a year to get a contract.
Right.
At that time, we have all these costs. And then it takes us 3 to 6 months to build technology for a full country.
Right.
And we're running in parallel in 4 or 5 countries at any point of time. And then we launch a product and we market. So it takes time, but we can easily see that curve going up in every country.
Okay. Is that going to accelerate as you get bigger?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Like Uber's early days, was every single launch was kind of a big deal. Now you kind of like, TechCrunch never writes about them anymore. Those new launches, because there's like too many of them, so, and they go faster and faster.
So we are getting faster and faster because of 2 reasons. One, we can launch countries faster. The second is our existing products also get faster because we can cache a lot of inventory. We already understand schedules, how pricing works, etc. So the product itself gets very fast with more and more consumers. So there's a lot of efficiency gains with scale.
Right.
And we have a deep understanding of now both network and customer travel patterns that makes us kind of smart in the middle.
Okay, so on the subject of your expansion, one of the ways you've been able to do that is by raising a ton of money. You've raised probably, if we grouped all these competitors together, I think you've raised more than all of them combined by a long shot, like by an order of like tens and millions and maybe 100 or more than $100 million, right? Okay. You going to raise more? Do you need to? And why have you raised so much? Because I mean, Rome to Rio, I think they've raised like 2.8 million or something silly. You know, you've raised what, 140 million now?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's big.
Yeah, it's a big difference. Yeah.
Big disparity, yeah. So do you actually need all that money?
It's a good question. So most large companies, and we're going after a very large space, 150 billion plus, Europe alone transport. Most large companies, when you go after a very large space and you want to move fast, takes capital, because you got to build everything for the consumer, and we focus on the consumer, which is both the partnerships, the technology, the marketing machine, and the customer experience. So we have to build all of this, and it takes a lot of capital. And we are not going after like a small industry. We are going to go for like hopefully taking a very big share of this large market, and it just takes a lot of capital. It doesn't mean that we need to raise more capital or we're sufficient or not. For me, raising capital is more a means to an end in terms of how large can we make the company, rather than, you know, in and itself the need to raise capital.
Yeah, what's your valuation now?
That's also confidential. Yeah,
You have to ask.
We are still too young. We're 3.5 years old.
Got it. Okay, but you've raised 140 million in A, B, and C rounds now, right?
3 rounds, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now it's kind of interesting to me because it was less than a year between your last two series, the B and C. It was
Correct.
sort of December, then October.
Correct.
Are we going to, have you kind of raised enough for now? Because, I mean, I know you and I were talking about this the other day, and it's like a refrain I hear from founders a lot. You know, when you raise money, you kind of can't do anything else. You're just spending all your time on planes and
Yep.
all that
It's
stuff.
the same. Yep.
Same.
And it's harder to raise capital out of Europe. So it takes
Harder to raise out of Europe.
Yeah, it just takes a little longer.
Why?
Well, mainly because the investors are not down the street. You can't. You do have to travel. To pitch, to get to know, and the whole process takes a while. So it just takes longer, I think.
Yeah,
I mean that's my personal experience.
one of your backers in this last round was Kleiner Perkins, right? Which is like kind of impressive. They're a very storied firm. They've had some absolute knockouts in their investments and stuff. You say it was hard to raise. Does that mean that you guys were kind of talking to tons? Or was it kind of like, oh, Kleiner approached us, let's go with Kleiner?
Yeah.
Or did you turn away others?
So yeah. So typically the way I look at fundraising is, so fundraising takes effort, and we've been lucky. We focus a lot of our time on operations and building the company, and so we've been lucky that most times when we raise capital, it's mostly inbound interest. So it is one or two or a few investors who already know us for a very long time, because most investors know us for a long time, because you need to understand the long-term nature of the business. We can't launch 40 more countries in 6 months. It takes time. So you need to understand the nature in which we work as a company, and how we build technology, how we scale each market, etc. So it takes any investor quite a bit of time, and it takes me quite a bit of time, at least 6 months to a year, to get to know an investor. So most investors already know us, and when one of them triggers a conversation saying, hey, are you ready to take on capital? And at that time, if we feel comfortable, we say yes. And then it's fairly quick from there on, because we have a few investors who are interested, and that triggers the process. And then you just pick the one that's going to help you the most, basically.
Was it important for you guys to raise from the Valley at this point, or are you still... Or was that because you couldn't get that kind of funding from a VC, or you weren't seeing that kind from the indexes, XLs of Europe?
So absolutely. So there is more capital in the US and larger checks. That's undebatable. That said, we do have sufficient good European VCs as well. We have Lakestar, who invested in us very early. The round before this, we have Atomico with Nicholas Zenstrom. They've invested heavily in us. So we do have a couple of European funds and 3 American funds. So it's fairly good balance for us, both in terms of talent from the US, which is what I'd like to get more of to scale companies. And the second thing is on the ground help here. In terms of operations. So it's a balance for me, rather than, oh, is it American money or European money?
Yeah. Okay, I have 2 more questions. I want to make sure I get to both of them. First one is, now you guys are really focusing on long distance travel. you of course have a ton of companies, whether it's Citymapper doing it for public transport or Uber looking to kind of like basically shove all public transport out of the way and do it their own way.
Yep.
Is that a market you at all want to try to complement, at least, if not get into, at least provide it as part of your end-to-end?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of money and focus going into urban transportation. So food delivery, Uber, local public transit apps, etc. But there's equal amount of, mind share for consumers in terms of long distance travel as well. It just happens less frequently. That doesn't mean the market's not as big. So we focus on intra-city transportation, which is an equally big market. And as you think of kind of more urbanization, less people own cars, more people use Uber and public transit systems inner city, that means more people are dependent on long distance transit systems like us to provide simpler solutions.
Right.
So that market is naturally going to grow. And it's also counter-cyclical in many ways in that when the economy is doing great, people travel to luxurious places, maybe longer distances. When the economy is doing poor, the urge to travel and the number of vacations in Europe doesn't change. So people travel shorter distances.
Right.
And so consumers travel no matter what.
They call them staycations here.
Yeah.
Staycation.
So serving that market is what we focus on, and I think there's still a huge opportunity for us to capture that market, and we can definitely complement with Uber and Citymapper to make an end-to-end journey better.
Are you talking to them?
So we are already in talks with a couple of
You're in talks with Uber and Citymapper
Not
to
yet
add.
Citymapper,
Not yet.
Yeah,
Not yet. Which one? Citymapper?
correct.
So you're talking in talks with Uber.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. That's news. So the last thing, can I just ask one last question, Jordan? Thanks. Skyscanner.
Yes.
So that is another travel aggregating startup out of Scotland, sold for $1.7 billion just a couple of weeks ago to C-Trip.
Yep.
Are you getting acquisition offers?
Can't comment on that, but it's a very nice
Lovely price, isn't
for
it?
the industry, correct.
Is it something that has that set some sort of a mark for you guys in terms of what you're going for valuation? Do you see a trend of more of these companies out of Asia trying to move in and to get more of a grip into the European market, looking to tap startups?
So I don't build companies because of valuation. You build companies to serve a consumer problem, and the larger the consumer problem you solve, valuation is a derivative of. It's basically like stock market. Valuation can go up or down. That's not the focus. The focus is really how can you build a large company in a very large industry.
Right.
So that's really what drives me.
Of course you would say that, but I mean, I'm just kind of curious.
No, it is really what drives me personally.
Yeah.
Because I fell in love with this problem that I wanted to solve.
Yeah.
I moved to Europe, left everything, didn't know anybody, so I'm after something that I want to solve.
That's the right attitude to have, actually.
But Asian companies coming to Europe, yes, I see more of that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Sorry, we're out of time. Thank you, everybody.